My parents chose my sister over me, then the truth came out. Part 1. My name is Olivia Bennett, and for 27 years, I believed there was something wrong with me. Not because anyone ever said those words out loud, but because actions have a way of speaking louder than love ever can. Growing up, my parents insisted they loved my younger sister, Sophia, and me equally. They said it every Christmas, every birthday, every family dinner. If you girls ever doubt it, Mom would say with a smile, our hearts are exactly the same size for both of you. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but love isn't measured by words. It's measured by choices, and every choice they made pointed in the same direction. Towards Sophia, never me. We grew up in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle, Washington. Dad, David Bennett, owned a successful architectural firm. Mom, Laura Bennett, worked as a real estate agent before becoming a full-time mom. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Large house, summer vacations, holiday traditions, family photos hanging neatly across the hallway. Everyone who met us thought we had everything. They were only seeing the picture, not what happened behind it. The first time I noticed the difference, I was 6 years old. It was my birthday. Mom had promised we'd spend the afternoon at the aquarium. I'd been talking about it for months. That morning, Sophia woke up with a slight fever. Nothing serious. The pediatrician later called it a mild cold. But before lunch, Mom canceled my birthday. We'll celebrate another day. I nodded. Because I was 6. What else could I do? The make-up birthday never happened. 3 months later, when Sophia turned 4, she had recovered completely. She got a princess party with ponies, balloons, and nearly 50 guests. I remember helping tape decorations to the walls. Dad smiled at me. Be a good big sister. I always was. School wasn't much different. Sophia loved soccer. Every weekend, my parents sat in the front row cheering louder than anyone else. I played the violin. For 4 years. My first solo recital came when I was 12. I searched the audience over and over. 2 empty seats. Mom called afterward. We're so sorry. Sophia's regional championship game ran late. Dad added, you understand. I said I did, because by then, I always understood. By high school, I'd stopped asking. If I won an academic award, I'd text a picture instead of expecting them to come. If I had a school event, I'd ask my best friend, Emma, to attend. She never missed one. Sometimes, family isn't the people who raise you. Sometimes, it's the people who choose to stay. Sophia, meanwhile, could do no wrong. She forgot homework. Mom emailed the teacher. She crashed Dad's SUV backing out of the garage. Dad hugged her and said, cars can be replaced. When I accidentally scratched the family dining table while doing homework, Dad made me use my summer job money to pay for repairs. Same house, same parents, different rules. College only widened the gap. I earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Washington. When the acceptance letter arrived, I ran downstairs smiling. I got in. Dad looked up from his laptop. Congratulations. Mom hugged me. We're proud of you. Then Sophia walked into the kitchen. I made varsity captain. The conversation immediately shifted. Within an hour, Dad was ordering pizza to celebrate. No one mentioned my scholarship again. Sophia graduated high school with average grades. She wanted to attend a private university in California. It cost nearly $60,000 a year. Dad paid every penny. When I quietly asked if they could help me with rent during graduate school, Mom smiled apologetically. We've stretched ourselves financially. I nodded. I understand. Those 3 words had become my entire relationship with them. After college, I stayed in Seattle. I became a financial analyst. I rented a small apartment, paid off my student loans, built a quiet life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Meanwhile, Sophia changed majors twice, dropped out after 3 years, moved back home, started posting lifestyle videos online. Somehow, my parents called her finding herself. When I worked 70-hour weeks to earn a promotion, Dad called me a workaholic. One Thanksgiving, I arrived home with homemade pumpkin pie. Sophia arrived 2 hours late carrying nothing. Mom hugged her first. Dad asked about her latest vacation. No one asked about my promotion. Halfway through dinner, Dad raised his glass. To Sophia, she looked surprised. For what? For following your dreams. Everyone clapped. I smiled politely. No one noticed. Or maybe, no one wanted to. The only person who ever questioned it was Grandma Evelyn, Dad's mother. She had sharp blue eyes and the kind of honesty that made people uncomfortable. One afternoon, while helping her plant roses, she asked, "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" "Pretending what?" "That it doesn't hurt." I looked away. "It doesn't matter anymore." She gently squeezed my hand. "Yes, it does." Grandma Evelyn loved both of us. But unlike everyone else, she saw what was happening. On her 78th birthday, she quietly handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a silver compass necklace. "It belonged to your grandfather. It's beautiful." She smiled. "I want you to have it." Sophia noticed immediately. "Why does Olivia get Grandpa's necklace?" Grandma answered without hesitation, "Because she'll understand its value." Sophia rolled her eyes. Dad looked uncomfortable. Mom quickly changed the subject. A year later, Grandma Evelyn became sick. Very sick. Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors estimated 6 months. I visited every weekend, sometimes after working 12-hour days. Sophia came twice. Both visits lasted less than 30 minutes. Yet whenever relatives called, Mom always praised Sophia for being so strong. I never corrected her. One rainy Saturday, Grandma asked me to open the drawer beside her bed. Inside was a thick manila envelope. My name was written across the front. "Not yet," she said. "When I'm gone." I looked confused. "What's inside?" She smiled sadly. "The truth." A chill ran through me. "What truth?" She simply shook her head. "You'll know when the time comes." 3 weeks later, Grandma Evelyn passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral brought relatives from across the country. After the service, everyone gathered at my parents' house. People laughed, shared memories, looked through old photo albums. I quietly slipped upstairs. The envelope was still in my purse. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. The next morning, the family met at the attorney's office for the reading of Grandma's will. Most of her estate was divided equally. Exactly as expected. Then the attorney paused. "Mrs. Evelyn Bennett left one personal letter to be delivered exclusively to Olivia Bennett." The room fell silent. Sophia frowned. "What letter?" The attorney handed me a sealed envelope. It looked almost identical to the one Grandma had given me. Except this one had a note written beneath my name. "Read both together." My heart started pounding. 2 envelopes. Both marked for me. Both connected somehow. I looked around the room. Mom suddenly looked nervous. Dad's face had gone completely pale. Sophia stared at them in confusion. Something was wrong. Something much bigger than an inheritance. I slowly opened the first envelope. And the very first sentence changed everything I thought I knew about my family. "Olivia, if you're reading this, it means I can finally tell you why your parents treated you differently, and none of it was your fault." I couldn't stop staring at the newspaper clipping. The headline was exactly what Grandma's letter had described. 5-year-old girl saves younger sister from kidnap attempt. There was a photo of my father carrying me toward an ambulance. Police officers surrounded us. Paramedics were rushing past, but my mother wasn't anywhere in the picture. Not in the article, not even mentioned by name. I looked at Sophia. "Doesn't that seem strange?" She nodded slowly. "I never noticed before." Neither had I. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' house. Mom answered the door. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "Olivia." I held up the newspaper clipping. "Why weren't you there?" She froze. For just a second. But I saw it. Fear. Real fear. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." I stepped inside. The article only mentions Dad. "Where were you?" Mom looked toward Dad. He slowly walked into the hallway. He looked defeated. "I think it's time." Mom whispered. "No." He gently took her hand. "We've hidden enough." We sat in the living room. The same room where I'd spent years feeling invisible. Dad took a long breath. "After the kidnapping attempt, you were taken to the hospital." I nodded. "I know that." He continued. "Your mother wasn't with us." "Why?" Mom began crying again. "Because." Her voice broke. "I was at the police station." I frowned. "For 12 days. Dad closed his eyes. "No. For 3 months." I stared at him. "What?" Mom finally looked at me. "The man who attacked you. He wasn't acting alone." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you saying?" "The police believed there was another person involved." I could barely breathe. "And," Mom whispered, "they arrested me." Everything around me seemed to stop. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it couldn't possibly be true. "You." Mom nodded through tears. I became the prime suspect. Sophia looked just as shocked as I was. "What?" Dad spoke quietly. "The kidnapper claimed Laura helped plan it." I turned toward Mom. That's insane. It was. But the police had to investigate. Mom looked down at her hands. They questioned every phone call, every bank account, every relationship, my entire life. They even searched our house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They thought you were involved. Yes. Why? I asked. Dad answered. Because the kidnapper knew details about your family. Our routines. The girls' schedules. The investigators believed the information had come from someone close. I looked at Mom. But you were innocent. She nodded. They eventually proved it, but it took months. And by then, she looked around the room. Nothing was the same. Dad continued. Laura lost her real estate job. Neighbors stopped speaking to us. People assumed she was guilty. Even after she was cleared. Sophia whispered, I never knew. Mom smiled sadly. Because we never told you. I slowly pieced everything together. So after all that, you became terrified. Dad nodded. We thought if we kept Sophia close, if we watched every move, nothing bad could ever happen again. But, I looked at him. You forgot about me. His eyes filled with tears. Yes. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking. The truth explained their fear. But it didn't erase 22 years of unequal treatment. Fear had become habit. Habit had become favoritism. And favoritism had become our normal. The next day, I visited Grandma Evelyn's old house. It had already been emptied. The realtor was preparing it for sale. Before leaving, she handed me one final box. The attorney said this belongs to you. Inside were dozens of photo albums, letters, old birthday cards, family videos, and one sealed envelope labeled, for Olivia, when you're ready to forgive. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I opened it anyway. Inside was another handwritten letter from Grandma. Sweetheart, your parents made terrible mistakes. But mistakes born from fear often last longer than fear itself. I argued with them for years. I begged them to treat you fairly. They always promised they would. Then another birthday would come. Another soccer game, another excuse, and they would break that promise again. Tears rolled down my face. Grandma had seen everything. She had tried. The last page contained something unexpected. A copy of a legal document. At the top it read, Confidential Settlement Agreement. I frowned. What settlement? As I continued reading, my heart started racing. The state had paid my family nearly $2.5 million after admitting investigators had wrongfully accused my mother. I blinked. $2.5 million. I looked at the date. The settlement had happened 20 years earlier. I whispered to myself, where did all that money go? I drove straight to my parents' house. I placed the document on the kitchen table. Dad looked shocked. Where did you find this? Grandma kept a copy. Mom looked away. You weren't supposed to know. I know now. I took a deep breath. What happened to the money? Neither answered. I repeated the question. Dad finally spoke. We spent it. On what? He looked ashamed. Therapists. Private security. Moving twice. Medical bills. Then he hesitated. And what? He whispered. Sophia. I closed my eyes. Of course. College. Cars. Trips. Living expenses. Everything suddenly made sense. Not because they loved her more. Because they had spent 2 decades trying to erase the trauma they believed she carried. Even when she no longer carried it. But what about me? I asked quietly. I almost died too. Mom burst into tears. I know. No. You know now. But back then, you only saw Sophia. Nobody spoke. For several minutes. Then Dad stood. He walked upstairs. When he returned, he was carrying a dusty cardboard box. He placed it in front of me. Inside were hundreds of letters. Every birthday, every graduation, every promotion, every Christmas. Letters addressed to me, never mailed, never given. I looked at him in confusion. What are these? Dad smiled sadly. I wrote them. You, what? Every time I missed something important in your life, I wrote you a letter. I told myself I'd give them to you one day. You never did. He nodded. I was ashamed. I picked up the first letter. It was dated the day of my violin recital. Olivia, I should have been there tonight. You deserved better. Another letter. The day I graduated college. I saw your picture online. You looked proud. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Another. My first promotion. Another. Every milestone of my adult life. He had watched from a distance. Feeling guilty. Doing nothing. I looked up. Why didn't you just call me? Dad couldn't answer. Because there was no answer. Only regret. That evening, my phone rang. It was the family. Attorney. Olivia, there's something else your grandmother wanted you to know. What is it? He took a slow breath. The man who tried to kidnap Sophia was released from prison 6 months ago. My heart skipped. What? And yesterday, he contacted our office. I froze. What does he want? The attorney's voice turned serious. He says, he has information that changes everything your family believes about that day. I couldn't move. The attorney's words echoed in my mind. He has information that changes everything your family believes about that day. The man who had destroyed my childhood, the man responsible for 22 years of fear, wanted to talk. Every instinct told me to hang up. Instead, I asked one question. What kind of information? I don't know, the attorney replied. He refuses to discuss it over the phone. He'll only speak if your family is present. 2 days later, the four of us sat in a small conference room at the Correctional Supervision Office. Because he had been released on parole, the meeting was supervised. When the door opened, the man walked in. He looked much older than the newspaper photos. Gray hair, wrinkles, a tired expression. He looked at me first. I've waited 22 years to say this. No one answered. He took a deep breath. I never planned to kidnap your sister. The room fell silent. Dad stood up. What? The little girl I was watching. He pointed toward me. Was Olivia. My heart stopped. What did you say? He lowered his eyes. I wasn't after Sophia. I couldn't breathe. Dad looked ready to explode. You're lying. The man slowly shook his head. No, the police got it wrong. He explained that 22 years earlier he had been working with a small burglary ring. One of the group's members believed my father kept expensive architectural plans and rare collectibles at home. They watched our family for weeks. The original plan wasn't kidnapping. It was burglary, until one member suggested using the oldest child to force my father to open the house. That child was me. I changed my mind, the man said quietly. I realized how insane the plan was. So I tried to leave. But another man in the group wouldn't. The room became completely silent. He approached Olivia at the park. I tried to stop him. Everyone stared at him. I grabbed Olivia to pull her away. The other man thought I was interfering. They fought. Olivia swung her scooter. The other man shoved her. She hit her head. My forgotten flashes of memory suddenly made sense. What happened to the other man? I asked. He disappeared. The police never found him. I refused to identify him. Why? The man closed his eyes. I was scared. Dad clenched his fists. You let my family believe a lie for 22 years. The man nodded. I did, and I deserve every day I spent in prison. The attorney slid a folder across the table. The FBI recently reopened several cold cases connected to that burglary ring. They found new evidence. DNA, old fingerprints, witness statements, everything supported the man's story. The investigation had been incomplete all those years ago. Outside the building, none of us spoke. Finally, Sophia whispered, so, he was never trying to take me. Dad looked devastated. No. Mom started crying again. We spent 22 years trying to protect the wrong child. Those words hit me harder than anything else. Not because they were cruel. Because they were true. For years, my parents believed Sophia carried the greatest trauma. But it had been me all along. I was the child who had nearly died. The child who had lived with unexplained anxiety. The child who kept waking up from nightmares she couldn't understand. And while I silently carried those invisible wounds, everyone else was trying to protect someone who had never been the target. A week later, Dad asked if we could meet. Just the two of us. We sat on a bench overlooking the water in Seattle. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. I've spent 27 years believing I failed one daughter. He looked at me. I was wrong. I failed both. He handed me a small wooden box. Inside was every letter he'd ever written to me. This time, they weren't hidden away. They belong to you now. For weeks, I read one letter each night. Some were only a few sentences. Others were several pages long. One from my college graduation read, I watched the livestream from the parking lot because I was too ashamed to come inside. Another said, every time you accomplished something on your own, I told myself you didn't need me. The truth was, I was too afraid you'd reject me if I finally admitted how badly I'd failed you. Those letters didn't erase the past. But they explained it. Regret had been living inside my father for years. He just never found the courage to speak it out loud. Sophia and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. One afternoon she laughed and said, you know, I used to think you were the favorite. I almost dropped my coffee. What? She smiled. You always got grandma's attention. You were the smart one. I spent years trying to become the daughter Mom and Dad worried about." We both laughed. Then we both cried, because we'd spent decades envying each other, without realizing neither of us had received what we truly needed. Mom started seeing a therapist for the first time. One evening she told me, "I confused guilt with love. I thought giving Sophia everything would somehow erase what happened. It didn't. It only created new pain." A year later, we visited Grandma Evelyn's grave together. Dad placed fresh white roses beside the headstone. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you," Mom whispered. "You tried to warn us." I touched the silver compass necklace around my neck. Grandma had known. She had spent years trying to protect me in the only ways she could. Even after she was gone, she was still bringing our family back together. 3 years later, I married Ethan Brooks, the attorney who had helped us through Grandma's estate and had gradually become my closest friend. It wasn't a dramatic love story. It was something quieter, built on honesty, trust, and showing up for each other. Things I'd learned never to take for granted. At the wedding, Dad stood beside me before walking me down the aisle. He looked nervous. "I don't deserve this honor." I smiled. "Maybe not." His face fell. Then I took his hand. "But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing." He broke down crying. So did I. Years later, when Ethan and I welcomed our first daughter, my parents came to the hospital. Dad held his granddaughter carefully. He smiled through tears. "I've been given another chance." I gently corrected him. "No, you've been given a chance to do better." He nodded. "I will." And he did. He never missed a birthday, a school play, a recital, or a soccer game, not because he was making up for the past, because he'd finally learned what being present really meant. Epilogue. People often think family secrets protect the people we love. Sometimes they do, but more often, they grow into walls that separate us from the people standing right beside us. My parents didn't stop loving me. They stopped seeing me. Fear narrowed their world until they believed protecting one child justified overlooking the other. By the time the truth came out, we had all lost years we could never get back. But the truth also gave us something else. A chance to stop living in yesterday. A chance to build tomorrow differently. Because the greatest gift parents can give their children isn't perfection. It isn't money. It isn't protection from every hardship. It's making sure that every child feels equally seen, equally heard, and equally loved. That lesson came too late for my childhood, but it arrived just in time to change the future.